All right, welcome to another episode of Inappropriate, Earl. And I know I say this a lot. I'm excited to have every guest on this show. But today's guest is a bucket list guest because, as you know, I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. I was lucky enough to co-host the last few months of Roddy Piper's podcast. And being in a room with him was like being with a superhero. And today I feel the very same way because the man I have on, he wasn't in the Monday Night Wars. He was the Monday Night Wars. And I have many things to thank him for how he treated my favorite wrestler, Sting, unlike his current company. And, of course, for bringing in the Ultimate Warrior in the greatest 34-minute segment ever in pro wrestling history. And I have so many questions to ask, and it is a true honor to have the one, the only, Mr. Eric Bischoff.
Thank you, Earl. It's a pleasure to be here. And after that build-up, I think we should just wrap this up right now because I can't live up to those expectations. But it's a great honor to be here.
But you can though, because you were so a part of so many of my favorite moments in wrestling, and frankly, I find wrestling unwatchable right now because it's just there's one company for the most part. And there's just the characters aren't there, and you were a part of the last great era of pro wrestling, in my opinion.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and it's funny. Wrestling has been around since the beginning of television time, and clearly was around a long time before wrestling or before television. But it's been around forever, and I think I've been in it now almost 30 years. And one of the things that I've found is that every generation, has a period of time that they look back and say, wow, that was the best era of professional wrestling. It'll never be that good again until it is. And something will come along somewhere down the line, and there'll be a reemergence, if you will, of wrestling in the mainstream media and mainstream, popularity, and we'll have another generation that will be looking back at 2016 or 18 and go, wow, that was the best decade of professional wrestling. So let's just hope it comes around again.
Because it's WrestleMania week, and I can't recall a WrestleMania that had so little buzz around it. Last year I was severely disappointed in how they used Sting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure how many times I'll be in a room with you, Mr. Bischoff. I hope many more. But you being a booker, you've done it all in the wrestling business. And,
pretty much.
I want to run my idea last year for Sting.
Okay.
And you give me your honest opinion.
Sure.
Now, to this day, it still does not make sense to me that he lost his first match in the WWE. And, to me, the run-ins they did at the end of his match, when the NWO came down to save him, when they were never aligned with him once, the black and white NWO.
Right.
To me, it would have made more sense if they all ganged up on him, beat the shit out of him, and then Goldberg's music hits, and he saves the day.
That could have been awesome. But when you look at scenarios like that, and when you have, and don't take this the wrong way, but
please,
and I do the same thing myself. You can always have perfect 20/20 hindsight and say, wow, if they just would have done this, or if they just would have done that. But the challenge with looking at things from that perspective is one never really knows or is aware of all of the variables that exist when that creative decision is made. Or when a creative decision is made. Bill Goldberg, for example, just to take your idea, that would have been a phenomenal scenario, and the audience would have reacted, in a great way, in a predictable way. It would have been awesome. But Bill doesn't have any desire to work for the WWE. He's made that abundantly clear in somewhat abrasive ways, throughout the years. So it's a great idea, but it's a great idea that probably could never happen just because of the people involved. I like your take on the NWO attacking Sting, because that would have kind of paid tribute to the legacy of the NWO and the relationship with Sting, and fans would have really, I think it would have resonated in a big way with fans. But there may have been other things going on. They may have had much bigger plans for Sting at that time to come out of that match and go forward in a storyline that made a great deal of sense that we'll never know about. Sting had his match. It didn't go that well for him. He did get hurt. And you have to realize that a character like Sting, as much as I respect him and love him for the person that he is and what he's accomplished, he's at the end of his career. There's a limit to physically what he can do and what he wants to do, even prior to the injury. So you just have to take all of those things into consideration when you're analyzing a story like that and recognize that there's just some degrees of information or variables that you just will never know about or understand.
I mean, I listen, obviously I respect your opinion much more than mine. I mean, you've been behind the scenes. To me, like, just as an idiot fan,
no such thing as an idiot fan, by the way.
Well, I mean,
they're fans and they're passionate.
Well, right. It's just the way to bring him in was like give him a couple wins. And so you build up his brand, like in the WWE, because there's a lot of fans who don't know who he is, which is crazy to me. But those say 13-year-old to 25-year-olds are like who didn't watch TNA, and now
there's a lot of those.
Well, we'll get to TNA in a second. But Triple H's character after WrestleMania is the same win or lose. To me, he's the badass corporate, shill, married in real life to the boss's daughter, which kind of adds to his character. If Sting beats him, it's like, who's that guy? Hey, we want to buy his DVDs. We want to, look him up on YouTube. And then, the next night on Raw, they have him in an awful segment with Bo Dallas, who's like, the modern day Iron Mike Sharp, it's just like, What are you doing to this guy? And then he lost to Seth Rollins. I mean, 0-2, and then he's being inducted into the Hall of Fame this weekend. It's like I don't think anyone cares. Like,
well, I think Sting's fans care, like you care, and I care. I mean, I'm going to enjoy it vicariously through him because I know it'll mean a lot to Steve Borden, the person, and to Sting, the character. But I agree with a lot of what you say in terms of Sting coming in and getting a couple wins and building up that legacy a little bit more before he finally got beat. I agree with you. I don't understand the idea of bringing him in and beating him right away the way they did, because it is a letdown. The fans that were excited about seeing him come to WWE are going to be disappointed automatically when he doesn't win his very first match. So I agree with that, but just keep an open mind and realize there may have been a plan that would have been a better plan if Sting wouldn't have got hurt and if things would have been different. Who knows? Maybe there wasn't. Maybe you're absolutely right on the money, and maybe there was never a plan to build Sting up and take advantage of his legacy and his character. But I like to think that there might have been.
I mean, I do too, but then, 20 minutes after their match, Triple H is in a suit and tie, looking like he just got out of a day spa, already in another angle with Ronda Rousey, and it's just like, and then JBL just burying Sting the whole match in the announcer's position. Now maybe he was being fed lines by certain people, but I don't know.
Unquestionably, and I don't like to name drop, so
please do.
I'm not going to do it today, but I had a really interesting lunch yesterday with a fascinating individual who probably has his finger on the pulse of politics more than anybody I've ever met in my life. Very high profile guy. And he's consulted with senators and congressmen and women and he's done a lot of great things in his life. And he just also happens to be a big wrestling fan, which I just love, because people have a perception of what a wrestling fan is or who a wrestling fan is. And they're almost always so wrong. Wrestling fans come in all shapes, sizes, races, nationalities, and so forth. And the person that I was talking to, who was a friend, asked about, why does wrestling work? How can it be so popular? And the answer is simple, and you're talking about it right now. When it's good, it allows you to suspend your disbelief. It allows you, everybody knows what wrestling is. It's not a secret. But when it's good, when it's believable, when you do the little things, the littlest things that lend credibility to it and allow the viewer to suspend their disbelief without feeling silly about it, then you have them. You have the audience. But when you do things like you just mentioned with Triple H being in a suit and looking like he just got out of a day spa 20 minutes after a match, it tends to take away from that believability and credibility, and it makes the audience almost feel a little embarrassed for wanting to believe in it. And it's those little things, like you just pointed out, that make all the difference in the world.
Well, it's like I don't want to make this a podcast all about Sting, but like to me, his last great storyline was when in WCW, that first match with Hogan, where it was so drawn out and the storyline was so compelling. And just the little vignettes of him up in the rafters, not saying anything. And Hogan as a heel was just awesome that first run. And you were like really wanted to see that match versus, now things seem to be done in, maybe a month. The storyline's started and wrapped up. And
that is unfortunate, isn't it? That you don't really have the long-term story arcs like there used to be. Not to interrupt you, but to add to your point, one of the things when I first started getting involved in the creative aspect of wrestling, because I didn't get involved in the creative end of things for a long time. I resisted it for a lot of reasons. But once I finally did and committed to it, I always admired the WWE because it seemed like they planned everything out 6 months in advance, a year in advance, and you were building up to these big moments. And I strived for that. In reality, that wasn't necessarily the case. And it certainly isn't now, but I think that has a lot more to do with just the sheer volume of television and pay-per-views that are produced. Right. When you've got 3 hours on Monday and then you got another 2 hours on Thursday, and you've got 12 pay-per-views a year, it's really hard to focus on long-term storylines. And that's really unfortunate. That's kind of like the unfortunate side of the business becoming so popular, because now it almost consumes itself creatively, because you just can't take the time to build up characters and build up storylines. You can't afford to lose the audience's attention.
I mean, that was what was great about having a legitimate competitor to the WWE is like it forced them to create basically what became DX, the NWO, and I mean, turning Hogan bad was like. It was like wrestling 9/11. I mean,
it was an amazing experience.
And just that the initial run of the NWO was just like, wow, you really hated those guys, and they were all so good. And then, like, do you think the NWO kind of maybe when Virgil started hanging around, did it become too watered down?
Well, I don't think it necessarily had anything to do with Virgil, but I think, the addition of so many people to the NWO was clearly, whether it was Virgil or Ted DiBiase or Marcus Bagwell or Scott Norton or
Horace Hogan
or the barber, whatever the hell he was called, the butcher.
The disciple.
Yeah, that in retrospect, that was a really bad idea on my part. And I can't defend it really other than to explain why I did it, even though I'm explaining it's still a bad idea, even though I can explain it. But the idea was to build the NWO up so it was big enough and had enough of a roster that I could split the rosters and I actually have an NWO kind of a Nitro would have been more of an NWO show, and WCW would have had its own brand on Thursday nights. That was, or it might have been vice versa. WCW on Nitro, NWO on Thursday. I can't remember which one we were going to assign to which program. But the idea was to build it up big enough that I could create a split and have essentially two separate brands. Right. WWE did it successfully with Raw and SmackDown. I did it unsuccessfully trying to utilize the NWO. But, if I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't do it. But I doubt I'll get that shot.
I don't know. Never say never.
Never say never. Yeah, you're right.
Because you're really the only guy to ever successfully compete against them. Not just compete, beat them for 2 years.
Yeah, and that was a lot of, so much of it is, and I really do appreciate you saying that. So I don't mean to diminish what you said. It's a compliment, but so much of it was timing, bro. I mean, you have to, if you step back and just close your eyes and sit back and look at the landscape back then. WWE, WWF at that time was coming off a pretty bad era. Vince McMahon had gone through a lot outside of the business. And the business had suffered a little bit. It had become stagnant and stale. It was kind of on autopilot to a large degree. There were some people that were in WWE that had previously been in WCW that were ready to leave WWE and come back. And when they, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash in particular, when they left WCW, they were frustrated. They were just pissed off and resentful of everything that was going on. Didn't feel like they were being treated fairly, or, as people like to use wrestling vernacular, used properly. So they went to WWE and became big stars. And when they were ready to leave WWE and come back, there was an instant storyline there, because now two guys who left with a bad taste in their mouth are coming back, and they're coming back with a chip on their shoulder, and they're going to make people pay. That was the premise of the NWO storyline. And that was more about timing than it was about great creative architecture on my part. It was fortunate. And it would be hard to recreate that kind of thing again, because the situation is so much different. The business evolved in such a way that opportunity will probably never happen again, where you have two stars who are coming off of, a successful run in WWE and ready to make a big move to another established wrestling organization. I just don't see it ever happening.
Well, it was great timing, because, guys like Savage and Hogan and Flair and even Warrior a couple years later, they were still like, fans my age were like, oh my God, they're going back to WCW, and it was such an excitement. And now I don't know if they're, if say, let's just say Roman Reigns went to TNA, I'd be like, oh, okay.
Well, and because you mentioned Roman Reigns, so I happen to really dig his character a lot. He's one of the characters. When I look at the WWE roster currently, there's a handful, but he's certainly at the top. There's just something about him. There's a charisma, there's an edge, there's something about him, and I don't know him. I've never met him, but there are a handful of guys that fall into that category. But you know what? They haven't been around long enough,
right? And
that's the other thing about the business or the industry that people sometimes fail to recognize, is that if you look at the stars, guys who are legitimate big stars in sports entertainment / professional wrestling, Stone Cold Steve Austin, who's a good friend of mine, Ric Flair, Goldberg. Well, Goldberg and The Rock are an exception, and we'll talk about in a minute. Roddy Piper, all of the Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, anybody that you could name that you could say was a big star, had been in the business for 10 or 15 years before they made it to that big star status. So the current roster at WWE, guys like Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan, whoever you want to name, that are more current, they just haven't been around long enough to have that oh my gosh factor if they were to make a big move like that. It takes 10 or 15 years.
Right. And like Reigns is like weird to me, because it seems like the fans kind of like him, but a lot hate him, or not hate, but like they're just, sometimes the WWE seems to have dropped the ball with him. Like,
I think they confused a lot of fans. I think they confused a lot of people a year or two ago, with false starts.
Right.
When you set a guy up and it looks like he's going to emerge, and then you take it away from him, and then you set him up again and you take it away from him again. If it's done properly, that can make the audience really want to get behind him and, push for him because he's an underdog. But you can also do it incorrectly, where they just lose confidence in the character altogether, and they just get a bad taste in their mouth. And it happens, unfortunately. And hopefully that's not what has happened to Roman Reigns. But I understand why the audience is confused.
Because they had him in the Shield with Rollins and Ambrose. It was like an NWO type of faction. And then they kind of broke him up, I thought, a little too soon. Mm-hmm. And then the fans, he's almost like John Cena. Like, they're torn as well. Kids love him, but the adults don't really like him. So what do we do? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? And I don't think he's had that opponent yet that brings out his best.
Probably true. And like I said, since I don't know him, I don't know how good he is on the mic. I don't know what his skill sets are outside of the ring. And that's a big part of it too. It's hard to give a guy a big push and make him that, hood ornament for your brand and represent your company when his mic skills or her mic skills maybe not be the best. Because a lot of what, characters do and stars do, they do it in the ring, but they do it outside of the ring as well. And they do it when there are no cameras around. You have to be almost an ambassador of the business in a way that's effective. And if a talent is great in the ring, but, shuts down when they get a microphone in their hand, that's a big disadvantage.
Can you teach someone that? Or like I remember when Rick Rude came on Nitro that first night, and it was just that little speech he gave was just like such charisma and just energy exuding from him. And you could tell it was just him. I mean, can someone learn that? Or if they don't have it, it's you limit their mic time or put them with a manager who, like a Paul Heyman or, someone of that ilk.
Yeah. I mean, to answer the question, it's, can someone teach me how to play guitar? Sure. Will I ever become Eric Clapton? Happy birthday, Eric. No, absolutely not. Some people just have that skill set and are born with that talent and ability. And yes, you can nurture it and you can make it better, and you can take somebody who's good and make them great, and somebody who's great, make them unbelievable. But if you take someone that's inherently shy or just not able to become that character deep down in their soul, you can teach them to become better, but you may not ever be able to teach them to become great.
Right. Now, when you, in the height of the Monday Night Wars, did you have not necessarily spies, but how did you keep up with what the WWE was doing? Did you have inside people there saying, hey, they're going to do this? Maybe you guys should have a bad guy faction or...
No. I mean, contrary to the urban legend, I didn't really watch hardly at all anything of what they were doing while we were in the thick of things, because there was no need to. I certainly wasn't trying to replicate a failed formula,
right?
Or at least I shouldn't say a failed formula. That is the wrong way to say it. Their formula was very successful for them because they were targeting kids and teens, and before Attitude Era, they were decidedly a very teen and preteen type of a product, because that was their business model. Much of their money was made in licensing and merchandising that WCW didn't have, quite frankly. So while they were targeting one demographic, I was targeting another with a different presentation. So there was no need for me to look at what they were doing and go, oh, wow, I got to come up with my own Doink the Clown. Right. Because I was trying to go in a much different direction. Now, did I have people who would inform me from time to time? For example, I got a phone call, and I'll never forget. I was taking flying lessons down in Kissimmee, Florida, and I got a phone call from a friend of mine who's since passed on, by the name of Zane Breslov. Zane used to work for the WWE, and he ended up working for me at WCW for a number of years. And Zane always had his ear to the ground. Zane always had inside contacts that he maintained as friends from his time in WWE. So occasionally Zane would call me and say, oh man, you're not going to believe what they're going to do next. And such was the case when they decided to sign Mike Tyson to do a deal at WrestleMania. And I remember, Zane calling me, and oftentimes he would call me with little tidbits of things that were just amusing. Very, very seldom was it anything that I went, oh, I better pay attention to that. But when Zane called me and he told me about Mike Tyson, I remember I was standing in a phone booth. Believe it or not, there were still phone booths back then. And when I called Zane and he told me that, I set the phone down, I took a deep breath, and I went, wow, I'm kind of toast, because this is going to be big.
Yeah, it's Mike Tyson.
Yeah, it's going to be big. And it was. But yeah, occasionally I get some inside information, but not very often.
Is that why you brought in guys like, say, Dennis Rodman to, not necessarily, he's not the same as Mike Tyson, but he's pretty close?
No, it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't a reaction to bringing in Mike Tyson. I always believed that in order for us to get the kind of publicity that we wanted, you have two choices. You need to go out and pay for it, which is very ineffective usually, or you can do something to create your own media. And signing somebody like Dennis Rodman, I knew would be very controversial, particularly at the height of his career. When he was playing for the Bulls, he was an NBA leading rebounder and world champion, and taking on Karl Malone and the Jazz. And Dennis was a controversial character in and of himself, whether or not he ever played a game of baseball or basketball. So, no, bringing in celebrities was not a reaction to Mike Tyson, but it was a desire on my part to get mainstream coverage of what we were doing.
Was he willing? He was pretty good in the ring for someone who a great athlete. Was he willing to listen to the boys and take their wrestling advice, or was he like, I got it, just let me do my thing?
No. Dennis. By the way, I really, really like Dennis Rodman a lot as a human being. If one would have an opportunity to spend a couple hours, and because it takes a long time to get Dennis to open up to you or to anybody, but when you really get to hear Dennis Rodman speak from his heart and from his experience, he is a wonderful human being. Not without his flaws, obviously, but
who isn't?
Who isn't is absolutely right. He's got a kind heart. He's one of the most generous people that I know. To a fault, he's generous, but he's a sweet person, believe it or not. But when he came in, he's such a professional. He listened to almost every word that Hulk Hogan gave him, because it was really Hulk that was helping to train him, along with some others. And he was all ears, man. He was 100% on his game. Now, I will tell you, it was hard to get him to the ring to train, because he was distracted with a lot of other more fun and interesting things to do at that time.
I can imagine.
And I got to tell you, it was kind of fun, being a fly on the wall and watching some of it. But when he got into the ring, he was all business.
Well, I imagine his basketball mindset would kick in as like, okay, I'm in the ring with someone who could probably hurt me if I mess up.
No, I don't think it was that at all. I think it was, he probably didn't want to get hurt accidentally, but Dennis is a perfectionist. And I think when you're an athlete at that level, or a musician at that level, or an actor or actress at whatever level, if you're performing, you reach that much success, you don't want to fail. You want to go out there and be the best you can possibly be. Now, Dennis had a gift. He was born with an athletic gift, and someone could show Dennis a series of moves in the ring that would take an average person, a month and a half or 2 months to get comfortable with, and Dennis would do it once or twice in slow motion, and by the third time, he was doing it like he'd been doing it for 15 years. He was just that guy. If Dennis would have spent 6 months training, Dennis probably could have been one of the better performers. Forget about being a celebrity or not. He would have been a phenomenal performer.
Do the boys what are their feelings when a non-wrestler comes in and gets a pretty big spotlight put on them? I mean, I'm sure they understand it's Dennis Rodman here, but hey, fuck it, I was wrestling in Mid-South, grinding it out with Abdullah the Butcher. Or is there not bitterness, but is there a little bit of resentment?
I think it depends on who the talent is. I think, for example, when Rodman came in with Karl Malone, Hulk Hogan, Diamond Dallas Page, the NWO, anybody, Randy Savage, anybody within close proximity to that storyline, were all like high-fiving each other in their sleep, because all it meant was the media was paying more attention, the audience was paying more attention. It was good for everybody, in the immediate area code, so to speak. But once you got outside that group of people who Dennis was working with, or any other celebrity, then I think as you get farther down the roster, you may find some people that are a little bit resentful. Whether they express it or not, it's a different thing. But yeah, I think you probably would find some.
And I mean, how do you deal with that? Do you just sit them in a room and go, listen, man, he's a big star?
I never dealt with that. I never felt the need to try to explain myself to somebody at that level. I I have a very high expectation of myself. And I'll give you the example. When I worked for WWE, when I worked for Vince McMahon, I never once questioned anything he asked me to do. Never once, because my job wasn't to question his creative decisions or strategic decisions. My job was to take the storyline that I was given and to do it absolutely the best I could possibly do it, to be the best character I could be and to deliver the best storyline I could deliver. That was my job. That's just the way I was brought up in the industry. And I have the same expectation of other people. So when I had talent working for me, it doesn't mean that I wasn't interested in hearing what they had to say creatively. If they had a positive suggestion or an idea that could maybe make something better, I was all ears. But to listen to somebody, piss and moan because a big celebrity's coming in, getting a big payday, and, they wrestled Abdullah the Butcher in Mid-South, that would not have, I wouldn't have spent a lot of time listening to that.
I really wish you would have brought Abdullah in just for a quick run.
I'm surprised we didn't. We brought in everybody else.
Well, listen, I'd be remiss to talk about this because, the Warrior he's 1A as my favorite wrestler. I've heard varying things about him in terms of the ease of working with him, but the look on your face during his initial promo might be the greatest non-vocal expression I've ever seen a human give another man. Because that I thought could have been an awesome storyline. The only man to cleanly pin Hogan comes back. The way you guys brought him out, Bobby Heenan announcing like he didn't know who it was. It was just the most amazing. I got chills. And 5-minute speech, crowd is super hot. And it's like, I don't think I've ever heard a crowd hotter. And then, I don't know, about from 5 to 10 minutes, still hot. And then he starts getting into the Shakespearean zingers. And something is like, Eric doesn't look too happy right now. At what point did you go, dude, you got to wrap it up?
Probably in about 12 minutes, because the whole promo was really only designed to be maybe 12 minutes long. And the look on my face while you were watching that go down on television was probably more concern on my part about just the timing of our show. You lay out a 2-hour show and every segment is timed. Now, it could go a little long or a little short depending on the situation, but by a little long and a little short, we're talking 30 seconds, maybe a minute. That's right. That's really significant because you've got commercial breaks. You've got to get them in. You've got to. All that stuff's got to get in that bag somehow, some way before the end of the show. And when that thing went on 14 minutes, 15 minutes, 16 minutes, 18 minutes, 20 minutes, I'm thinking, major cluster going on here because it's going to affect the rest of the show. Now the timing on everything else that we had to have planned had to change because the amount of time that took. So that was, probably the look on my face, combined with the fact that it was just the promo became incoherent after about 5 minutes. And he was just going off on a track that nobody really understood where it was going or what the outcome was going to be. We were all just literally standing there looking at each other going, I don't even know how to react to this. What do we do next? He just clearly had to improv.
I think it was 28 minutes.
It was the longest 28 minutes of my life.
Yeah,
I've never given birth, so I don't know what that feels like. But from what I've heard, from what my wife has told me, childbirth can feel like hours and hours and hours of pain, even when it's not. And that's kind of what that reminded me of. It's like giving birth to a rhinoceros.
Well, now I don't think I've ever heard you talk about what was the conversation with him like when you guys get backstage. I imagine it was something along the lines of, what the fuck was that?
I don't remember. I wish I did, but I don't.
Right.
Knowing me the way I know myself and particularly how I would have reacted probably back then, I would have just avoided him because I would have been angry, and confronting him when I'm angry would have been unproductive.
Right. And I'm not giving you any gruff over that storyline, but was that storyline maybe one of the disappointments toward the end of Because I thought in theory it was like, wow, this is great. There,
Well, I think it could have been. It could have been much better than it was, obviously. But if you remember, where he got hurt, he tore a bicep right after he got there, and that put him out of action for quite a while. That's a serious injury when the muscle completely tears away from the bone and the tendon and just rolls up and looks like a big, giant softball, up in your shoulder. It requires surgery and takes a long time. So that really pulled the rug out from underneath the storyline, and we had to kind of like make do with what we had to try to salvage it.
Right. Now, of course, bringing in Kiss, my favorite group of all time, and the wrestler, the Demon, Dale Torborg. Was that, Kiss was big at the time. The reunion was kind of in full gear. Did that work out like you wanted it to?
No, it didn't, but it had nothing to do with Kiss. The idea, the original idea was, and if you remember all of the awareness and discussion and fear surrounding 1999 and 2000, the new millennium, there was a period in time where people were actually concerned what was going to happen to the internet.
Y2K.
Everybody was so concerned about it. It was in the mainstream. And I thought, okay, I've got an idea. Wouldn't it be great to do a pay-per-view on December 31st, 1999, start that pay-per-view around 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock, and start it so that in such a way that the last match would have its finish, and the finish would coincide with a countdown of Y2K, so that it would be literally one tap, 11:59:57, whatever it is. So literally the pay-per-view ended on the final count of a 3 count. That was the idea. And the way I was going to utilize Kiss in that is I had successfully negotiated with the Fiesta Bowl, because it takes place in Tempe, Arizona. And I was going to do it the night before. I was going to do it before the Fiesta Bowl. We're going to do it down on the field, and half of the field would have been set up for wrestling. And then at the 50-yard line, you look in the other direction, and there would have been a stage, and it would have been a Kiss performance. And the format for that pay-per-view was going to be Kiss performance on this end zone, go to this end zone for a wrestling match, and just bounce back and forth all night long between Kiss performances and wrestling matches. And that was why we wanted, Kiss and Gene Simmons involved, because it added to that heightened Y2K kind of feeling. So it worked well. We set it up well. It could have probably worked okay, but I was never able to pull off the pay-per-view.
Well, I can imagine the negotiations with Gene must have been, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall.
It wasn't bad. It wasn't, look, Gene is a weaponized negotiator.
Because he knows what he wants.
He knows what he wants, and he's really, really, really smart and really good at what he does. And I'm not saying it was easy in the sense that I got what I wanted, because quite frankly, I paid dearly for his involvement. And I do believe to this moment, had I been able to pull off the pay-per-view, and I was shut down by Turner Broadcasting, by the way. It wasn't that I couldn't pull it off. I had pulled it off. I got Gene Simmons and Kiss. I got the Fiesta Bowl on board. I got the pay-per-view companies on board. I couldn't get Turner, the company, on board because too many employees complained about having to work over the Christmas and New Year holiday. They put up such a fit that I actually had corporate executives higher up than me tell me that they wouldn't support it. Had they supported it, had that pay-per-view happened, I do believe it would have been hugely successful, and everybody would have had a different perspective on Kiss's involvement in WCW, because the outcome would have been different. But being shut down in the middle of it, it was doomed to failure. But to your question, I enjoyed my negotiations with Gene. My first meeting with him was at the Beverly Hills Hotel over in Rodeo, and I walked in and he had the whole section of the back, the bar. It was at like 4:00 in the afternoon, so it wasn't busy. So he had his own little booth in the back, and it was just stacked, almost to the ceiling with Kiss merchandise. I thought, wow, this guy's committed.
No, that he is.
And it was so cool, and I got along with him fine, and I liked it. I liked the whole process. It's just unfortunate I couldn't see it through the way I wanted to.
Now, this is probably, a lot of comics are huge wrestling fans, and all of them, when they found out I was having you on, to me, the greatest swerve in wrestling history is you as the minister at the Billy and Chuck commitment ceremony.
That was awesome.
It seemed like none of them knew. Who knew that you were the minister? Seemed like it was a very kept, like no one in the ring knew outside of, I'm assuming, Stephanie.
Stephanie knew, and I'm not sure anybody else knew. I'm not sure if any of the talent knew. I would imagine they did. Chuck and Billy in particular. I would imagine they did, because there was an aftermath that had to happen,
right?
Once I revealed myself. So I imagine the wrestlers did know, but I'm almost certain they didn't know right up until probably the last couple, maybe an hour or two before the show. I can tell you for sure nobody else knew, because I went to the arena. It was in Minneapolis, actually, and where I lived for a long time. And I went to the arena. I must have got there about 9 a.m. Now, typically we didn't show up. Talent didn't show up till noon or 1 o'clock, if I remember right. But I showed up at 8 or 9 a.m. because I was in a makeup chair for 5 hours, and I wanted to be in full makeup before anybody else showed up, because I didn't want people to see that it was me. I didn't want anybody to know. So I got there early. We got into the makeup, and I walked around all day, literally just effing with people, because they didn't know who I was. I looked like this old, broken, senile old man, and I was walking up to people and just saying some of the most horrendous shit you can imagine to them, trying to get a reaction out of them. And, people don't react to 75 or 80-year-old men the way they would react to a 25 or 30-year-old man. You can walk up and say anything you want and get away with it. And the one story that I'll tell you, and I've told it before, but it's still so funny. It's funny to me, and I've told it a million times. But I have a good friend that I knew in high school by the name of Brad Ringens. Brad was a professional wrestler. He also wrestled on the Olympic team, the U.S. Olympic team. Then was a professional wrestler, worked for the Vern Gagne and AWA, and then went on and worked for the WWF for a long time. And we just always been friends. We hunt together and fish together, or used to. And Brad showed up at the arena a couple hours early, and he had, I think they were his two nieces with him. They're either his nieces or they were daughters of a girl he was seeing. I really can't remember. But he brought them backstage, and he got back there really early. And he was just kind of walking around, sometimes the way people do. And I kind of shuffled up to him in full makeup. I said, "Hey, Brad, I know you. Who are these cute little girls you have with you? They are very, very lovely." And Brad just looked he didn't know what to do. Now, because he didn't know it was me. He thought it was this old man hitting on these two little girls that he's with. I said, "You little girls, would you like me to show you around the arena?" Huh? And I walked away. And I could just see the look on Brad's face. He didn't know what to think of it. And then later on that night, when after I revealed myself, I saw Brad backstage, and I think he wanted to take my head off because he just didn't know. And I was doing the same thing. I did the same thing to Eddie Guerrero backstage. Walked right up to him and said some ridiculous stuff to him, just trying to get a rise out of him. And he didn't know what to do. He just walked away from me.
Well, even during the segment when you were speaking, I didn't know it was you. I mean, it was just fabulous acting. I have to be honest with you. And Enrico has the I guess semi-gay wedding planner. Everyone's part was so amazing in that segment.
It was fun. It's still, when I look back and I've been blessed to have an opportunity to do a lot of great things on camera that were really, really fun. And it's hard to pick one that was my favorite, because they're like children, each one have something about them that's special to you in a different way. But that if it's not my favorite, it has to be one of them. And, every once in a while, people will send me a clip of that on Twitter or Facebook or something, and I'll see it again for the 500th time. And I still laugh my ass off when I see it. It still makes me chuckle.
Oh, when you dropped the book, did I just say 3 minutes and just I mean, wrestlers, that's why I loved wrestling so much as a kid, is the acting was, you really believed. And everyone in that ring that night was just, I mean, I really thought Billy and Chuck were going to get married. I got to be honest with you. And they were on Good Morning America. I mean, that was a huge storyline.
It was great.
Because, of the, the gay angle. And I think everyone thought they were going to get married.
It was so great for so many reasons, and everybody's performance in that ring that night, and the creative that went behind it was just so on the money. And here's another great thing about working for the WWE, and I have to give them a lot of credit because they deserve it. When the idea came up to do this and to put me in a mask, they flew me from wherever I was at the time. I don't remember where I was. I must have been in Phoenix. They flew me out to LA, and I went to one of the probably one of the best makeup artists in studios in Hollywood. I walked into their studio and I'm looking at the things that they had done in the past, and this is stuff that harkened me back to all the movies, horror movies, and all these different things that I've seen. They were the ones that produced that makeup and that mask for me, and it was extensive. It took 6 or 8 hours for me just to get fitted for that mask and the makeup that went with it, and then it took another 4 or 5 hours to put it on in Minneapolis a couple weeks later.
Oh, it was amazing. Now, like I mentioned, being a kid, liking wrestling, it was before the internet. So, of course, there's Kamala's book right in front of you.
Right in front of me.
So when I was a kid, there was no internet. Kamala was billed as being from Uganda. I believed it because there was no, now if someone's billed as being from Uganda, you can look up their Wikipedia page and, they're from, Pittsburgh.
Rahway, New Jersey. What's up with that?
Do you think the internet has hurt the allure of wrestling being not real, but the storylines? It almost ruins, like when Warrior came back, some guy posted on a wrestling site, I just saw the Ultimate Warrior, I think it was in Buffalo. He had his gear on. I was like, I guess he's coming back tonight. So do you think the internet has hurt wrestling?
I think it's changed wrestling. I think it's hurt certain aspects of the industry. In my book, and I've talked about this a lot outside of my book, but story, anticipation, surprise, reality, and action. Those are the 5 elements. The acronym is SARSA, right. But if a story can have all 5 of those elements, it's a home run. You could literally build your company around it, and you can be successful for years and years with a storyline. Right. If you can successfully achieve all 5 of those elements, which is really hard to do. 4 out of the 5 is a great story. You may get 6 months out of it, maybe a little longer. 3 out of 5, it'll last a month or so. It's good filler. But if you can't get at least 3 out of 5 of those elements to a story, then you're probably just chasing your tail. And what has happened with the internet is two of the critical elements in that formula is anticipation and surprise.
Right.
And if you think about it, it's our culture, it's human nature. When you're a little kid, you look forward to a holiday. You look forward to your birthday. You look forward to whatever you're looking forward to as a kid, because that's what you do. You just, what's next? I get my first bike. I get my first whatever. As you get older, it's, I can't wait to get my driver's license, or get my first car, or get laid for the first time, or whatever your first thing is that you're looking forward to. You're anticipating it. And it's part of our nature. And people love surprises. It's one of the things that when I was doing research and focus groups, trying to figure out a great formula for Nitro so that it was different than the WWE, the one thing that I kept hearing in every focus group I did was surprise. We want that feeling of anything can happen. We don't want it to be predictable. I heard that over and over and over again, so much so that on the top of all of the things, the list that I made of all the characteristics that our format had to have to be different than the WWE, surprise is right at the top of it, which is why I did what I did with Lex Luger, which is why I did what I did when I was giving away finishes, because I was doing something that nobody expected. I was surprising them in a controversial way. And what the internet has done is it's made it almost impossible to achieve that element of surprise. And if you don't have the element of surprise kind of bred into your content and your programming formula, then it's really hard to create anticipation. So that's what I think the internet does. It's made it almost impossible to get two of those three elements. Now, it doesn't mean you can't, but it's so hard. So hard.
Well, you did. I mean, how did you keep Hogan turning bad guy? I mean, that was a huge surprise. I mean,
I didn't tell anybody. That's the only way I was able.
Who knew? Just you and him, pretty much. And I'm assuming Hall and Nash.
No, Hall and Nash knew shortly before, very shortly, like maybe a day or two.
Because wasn't I've heard that in the formation or the early beginnings of the NWO, Sting was possibly considered to be, which would have been cool to see him as a bad guy, but not. I mean, Hogan was like, it had never been done before.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the story with that. Going back at that time, Hogan only had 4 pay-per-views a year in his contract. We couldn't afford to use him anymore. He was paid per pay-per-view. And there were 4 of them built into his contract. There were 4 of them built into my budget. And he had already had a couple of them under his belt, and we weren't going to use them again until October or December. So we had to figure out a great story without utilizing Hogan. And Hulk was off doing a movie. He was here in California doing a movie called Santa with Muscles, by the way. And we just went about our business. And by the way, I'll put this in a little bit of clearer context. I had gone to Hulk months before and asked him to consider turning heel, because the red and yellow thing, the babyface Hulk Hogan thing, just wasn't working in WCW. And he knew that.
And why do you think it wasn't?
I think part of it is the WCW audience was a little bit of a different culture. They didn't really like feeling like they should look up to this WWE or WWF character in the same way. So I think there was a little bit of just, well, we're just not going to react the way you want us to kind of vibe. And I think the character was tired. They had seen it a lot, and they just weren't buying into it the way they did 5 or 10 years earlier. It had worn out. And Hulk knew it, and I knew it. Everybody knew it, but nobody wanted to admit it. So Hulk went off to go and do movies, and then I set about the NWO storyline. And Hulk was literally watching it. I think Jimmy Hart was sending him VHS tapes after every show. And because he was in a very remote area on location. And Hulk was watching tapes of what happened with Scott Hall when he showed up, and then, Kevin Nash power bombing me off of the stage in Baltimore. So I had his interest, right? But I didn't plan on him coming. And I had asked him to turn heel months previous to that. And Hogan, politely, showed me the door and thanked me for coming to Florida. And his exact words were, "Man, you'll never get it until you walk a mile in my red and yellow boots. You'll never get it." But he was nice about it. Right. And he, like I said, he showed me the door, and that was the end of it. Went off to do a movie. I set about doing the NWO angle, and then I got a phone call from Hulk. He said, "Eric, why don't you come to California? I'd like to talk to you about what's going on." So I said, "Sure. I like going out to LA. I'll come out." I went out. I went to his trailer. He had a case of beer and a box of Cuban cigars. It was about midnight by the time I got there. And we fired up a cigar, cracked a couple beers. And he said, "So who's the third guy going to be?" I said, "Well, who do you think it should be?" Because I didn't want to tell him. He said, "You're looking at him, brother." I said, okay. But what I had done, because I didn't know up until that point, that was probably only about a month before the angle went down. So prior to that, I went to Sting and said, "Sting, I need you to be the third guy. Here's why. Here's what we're doing." And Sting was he was on board. Sting was going to do it
because he had been a baby face since
the beginning.
Yeah.
And he was up for it. Because he saw what was happening with the NWO. He saw the energy, and he was ready to change his character. He's just a wonderful person and a real pro in that respect. But then when Hogan tagged in, I had to go to Sting and say, here's the situation. Hogan's willing to do it, ready to do it. What do you think? And he agreed. Hogan doing it would have been bigger, but I didn't know for certain that Hulk would actually follow through and do it until he showed up in the building that night. My experience with Hulk would be that at that time was that he would second guess himself a lot. And what that really means is there were certain people around him that would get in his ear, his ex-wife not being the smallest voice in the room, that would get in his ear and make him second guess his decisions, no matter what they were. So I'd get a commitment, on a Monday, and by Wednesday, it was, no, brother, can't do that. So I didn't know for sure whether he'd actually do it right up until the last minute. But Sting was standing there ready to go the day of the show to be that third guy, just in case Hogan had a change of heart. Right. And that, to me, if he deserves a spot in the WWE Hall of Fame just for being that much of a professional.
So, I mean, basically, if Hogan would have, whatever his wife or what ex-wife put in his ear, don't do it, Sting would have turned on Luger and Macho Man in the match. And, okay.
Sting would have been the guy.
Wow.
You had to have plan B, brother.
Was there a plan C? I mean, was there like... Okay.
No, I didn't go that far. I knew I could count on Sting. I knew I didn't need a plan C.
Is it tough to get guys to change their character once they, are so identifiable, like a, Macho Man or, Sting, certainly Hogan? Is it, do you think they're scared of, well, they know me as this?
I don't think they're scared. I think they're smart. It's not like being an actor where you can play a different role in every movie you're in, or a different type of character in every movie you're in. When you're a wrestler, the audience identifies with that character, they support that character, and they stick with that character. It takes a long time to get their support, as we talked about earlier, and to get their following. But once you do, they feel like they own you to a degree. Right. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, they relate so much to that character. It's a part of their life. So guys like Sting, Hogan, I'm sure John Cena, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Undertaker, you name them, Bill Goldberg. Once you get guys that reach that level, they're very aware of how hard it was to get there.
Right.
And they're very protective of it because they don't want it. They don't want to fail. It's taking a long time to get where they got. They don't want to screw it up. It's not like, if it doesn't work, I can come back as that old character and everybody will forget. No, they won't. If you build yourself up as a character and you get everybody to love you and you turn heel and they just crap on it, good luck coming back.
Right.
You can reinvent yourself once, but it's hard to reinvent yourself twice.
Like, was it tough, when the NWO really hit? When did you first know it was like, wow, this was a great idea? Like that night when there was a riot in the ring almost?
Well, no, I realized that it was going to be a successful storyline in Baltimore when I got power bombed off the stage by Kevin Nash. That's when I knew we hit it. We made contact with the ball, and I knew it was good contact. I wasn't sure it was going to go out of the park, but I knew we were going to get at least a triple out of it.
Right.
And then certainly when the pay-per-view event went down and Hogan turned and they were throwing garbage in the ring, then I knew that the ball was not only out of the park, no one was going to find it.
I mean, there's the guy in a white t-shirt crying because he was so like, wow.
It was amazing, wasn't it? And I remember the feeling that I had, and I was way back. I think I might have been up in like the cheapest seats in the building, or even up behind that, kind of peeking through a curtain. And it was just such an amazing feeling, seeing all of that emotion, anger and pain and hurt and disappointment, and people cheering and throwing stuff in the ring. And it was just, I don't know. I've never experienced anything like that before, and hopefully I'll experience something like that again, but I doubt it.
I mean, that to me is the greatest speech ever, because you could tell Hogan, I don't know if he had it planned, but it was just, If he didn't, it was the best improv speech I've ever
No,
heard.
and let me tell you, I'll tell you a quick story about that because I don't know how much time we have.
Well, I mean, how are you on time? I can talk for hours.
I got to be back Saturday, so
Great. So this is going to be a 3-day podcast.
so when Hogan got to the building, because I didn't really want him to get to the building early because I didn't want anybody to see him. Remember, he had been out of sight. Nobody had seen him, been off doing a movie. As far as everybody was concerned, both internally and externally, Hogan was nowhere near the radar. And I didn't want him showing up to the building so people could say, oh, I wonder if he's the third guy. I didn't even want the question out there. So I didn't want Hulk to show up until after the show actually started because he wasn't on until the end. So when he got there, I didn't have a lot of time to work with him. And rehearse his promo. And back at that time, he relied on me to help him through his interviews, and we rehearsed together. And I was kind of his Mean Gene Okerlund. You know,
Right.
He was comfortable with me. I was a blanket he was comfortable being with at that point. So I took him back, and we were literally back in a closet. We were in a utility closet because I wanted to be away from everybody. I didn't want anybody to hear what we were about to do. And I started rehearsing his promo with him. And believe it or not, up until that point, I hadn't considered what to call this organization. I didn't feel like I hadn't given the thought that it needed a name. So there was no name for that organization up until the moment in that closet when I'm going through Hogan's promo with him. And that's when the words, and this is the new world order. That the first time it rolled off my tongue was the first time it popped into my head. And I don't even know where it came from other than, I've done a lot of reading and things like that.
Right.
So I'm sure it, referenced my memory, from something I had read a long time ago. But when the words rolled out of my mouth, I went, whoa, that's pretty badass. That'll stick. And that's what we went with it. Maybe an hour and a half before the promo is when we came up with the name New World Order. And Hulk went out there and, he just nailed it. He hit it right on the head.
He just really, you could tell there was like a little bit more energy and, not an anger, but like, yeah, I made that company rich up there. And, I was selling out the world when you guys were bumming gas to put in your car to get to high school. I mean, that's a great line, dude.
Well, and because it's true.
Yeah.
Here's the greatest part about what I used to do and occasionally still try to do once in a while is, when you create a storyline or a character, for me, I should say, when I create a storyline or a character for someone, I look for something that's kind of inherent to their real world and their real personality, because we're not actors. We act and we perform and we're pretty good at what we do out there on our platform in a live setting. But we're not skilled actors or actresses really. So the way you bring somebody up to reach their highest potential is you create characters and storylines that are real to them and are honest to who they really are. So they don't have to dig that deep. They don't have to go into, a method acting kind of mentality and become a character because they already are. That's why Randy Savage was so great at what Randy did, because 80% of what you saw was Randy Savage's real personality. He wasn't that much different out of the ring than he was in it. The volume was a little higher. It was a little more intense in the ring than out of the ring, but shades of gray.
Right.
Hulk Hogan was a little different. Hulk Hogan is a genuinely nice person. He doesn't have a violent bone in his body. I don't think he would step on a cockroach. He would try to shoo it out the door instead. Right. That's who he really is. And, he played this larger than life character that, would drop the big boot and all that kind of stuff. But there's also a side of Hulk that is that NWO guy. He just always had to keep it inside.
Right.
He had to be that other character. So when we gave him an opportunity to just let that part of him out and say the things that he really felt inside, but to turn up the volume and put a little shiny paint on it, make it a little different than maybe how he really felt, just turn up the volume a little bit. It worked so well for him and it felt real because it was real.
That was amazing. And like with the emergence, and I know you got to go in a few minutes.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I could talk to you all day. With the emergence of the NWO, we talked about earlier, guys like Sting and Hogan being protective of their characters. The Four Horsemen were kind of the, I guess you'd say, almost precursor to the NWO in terms of being the bad guy faction? Was it hard to go to, say, Ric Flair and Mongo McMichael, I think, was in them at the time, and go, hey, guys, this is going to be the new bad guy faction. You guys kind of have to play second fiddle to them?
Well, so it wasn't with Mongo. Was a great guy. He was easy. He just wanted to have fun.
Oh, he was great.
He just wanted to have fun. It was a little different for Rick and Arn Anderson.
Wow.
And not so much because they were the original, bad guy faction, as it was the formula with the NWO was a different formula. And I was talking to somebody in the WWE the other day about this. When we brought the NWO to the dance, it changed the psychology, the dynamics of creative psychology, because up until that point, heels were liars, cowards, cheaters, and thieves, right?
Right.
And when they were confronted with a good guy who wasn't going to stand for their crap, and they could no longer pull any more, heel rabbits out of their heel hats, the good guy prevailed. Well, with the NWO, we changed that dynamic, and it made for very, very uncomfortable performers because the formula was out the window. The psychology was out the window. The way they normally laid out matches to get the reactions that they wanted to get from the audience and tell the story they wanted to tell, all of a sudden was turned on its head because the heels, the bad guy faction, were so freaking cool that they became de facto baby faces in the process.
Right. Which
left your baby faces, from a psychology point of view, storytelling point of view, standing there, with their units in their hands going, oh, what do I do to get my steam back? That's what really probably left more people like Ric Flair and Arn Anderson uncomfortable at that time, along with some lack of respect, I think, on my part, admittedly. I didn't take into consideration their feelings, their points of view, their characters as much as I should have or could have at that time. So between, the talent being a little uneasy with the creative formula, the psychological formula, and kind of feeling like they were getting run over the top by me and the NWO and other people in the process, there was some real political animosity going on backstage.
Well, was it because, the NWO got so big so fast? Did it become bigger than you expected?
Yeah. And as we discussed earlier, it became too big eventually, but it was so successful. To this day, if you go, watch WrestleMania Sunday, and let's compare notes. How many NWO shirts are you going to find in the audience?
Right.
There's still merchandise out there. People are still, I go to events to this day, and people are still coming up and flashing a wolf tag or Wolfpack sign and giving me, the NWO routine. It's still out there. 20 years later, it still resonates.
It, the greatest heel turn ever. It was just like that. You go back to talking about surprises, and it was like no one saw it coming. And to me, that's what's lacking now. It's like there's really no surprises, and like
it's hard to get a surprise. Shane McMahon showing up, on Raw a while back, a couple of weeks ago, that was a surprise. I thought it was cool. Didn't expect it. They kept it pretty quiet, but it really is hard to create surprises, as we discussed. And the other thing is, in the WWE is so successful, it's hard to be critical of them. And what I'm about to say isn't really a criticism. It's just an awareness and a perspective that I have, but it's too slick. It's too good. It's just too good in its production quality. One of the things I like about live TV is, that sense that anything can happen. It needs to feel a little gritty. It needs to feel a little edgy. It's okay if you see a camera or a lighting stand fall over on set once in a while, because that's what happens in real life. And it makes you realize you're watching something that's happening in this moment. But when you go to the extreme, in my opinion, that the WWE has, to be so glossy and perfect in your presentation, it really doesn't matter whether it's live or not.
Right.
And in some cases, people probably don't even know it's live. It looks like it's been in a post-production facility for 2 weeks, when you see it. It's that clean. I wish it was a little grittier. Yeah. I wish that we had more surprises. I wish that we focused more on anticipation and reality. Just the little things, the little nuances that make a story believable. It's not that hard. It doesn't always have to be a Hulk Hogan turn or an NWO idea. It can just be little things that you almost don't even perceive when they're happening, but you walk away feeling like, wow, this could be true.
I mean, do you think the problem with the writing process is, like, to me, they're not bringing in wrestling? Not that you want a wrestling fan writing a huge storyline, but like they're bringing in these Hollywood guys who maybe aren't necessarily wrestling fans, so they don't understand the psychology of the fan who they want to buy the pay-per-view and the T-shirts and whatnot.
And I brought in a couple guys, and I can't remember the names, and I wish I could, because they were great guys. I brought in a couple writers from Hollywood that had great success here in different genres, and I brought them in, and they were wrestling fans, and they were great. They did so many great things, but they didn't get the psychology. It's the one thing they didn't understand, because the psychology in wrestling is just a little bit different, and they didn't get it. And I couldn't teach it to them because it's not something that you can teach in a week or a month or 6 months. But I think the problem that perhaps, so I'm not there, so I don't know, but I think the problem perhaps is not that there's anything wrong with the writers. It's just the sheer volume. It's
Right.
sheer volume, and probably a lack of focus on key elements that just historically work in wrestling.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to name drop, but I will. I once had a meeting with Shane McMahon where he had seen my comedy. He's like, "Oh, you're a wrestling fan. Let's bring you in for a meeting." And we had dinner once, and he's like, "What kind of storyline would you come up with?" I'm like, "Oh, a typical bad guy versus good guy. Bad guy cheats, does everything he can to win. The last 5 minutes of the match, the good guy gets almost like these superhuman powers and combats the forces of evil." And he just shakes his head at me and goes, "We're not really about that right now." And he whipped out his phone and showed me the current storyline. I'll never forget. It was Triple H versus Kane. Kane didn't want to fight him. It's kind of like that Rocky II storyline where Triple H was trying everything to get Kane to fight him. And then finally the last Raw before the pay-per-view, they showed Triple H going to a grave. And in the storyline, Kane had killed a girl drunk driving. Triple H is unburying the body, and you just see a silhouette of some kind of act going on. And Shane just looks at me, and I'm like, I don't think I'm the guy for you. I couldn't come up with that storyline in a million years. So I don't know.
And they probably shouldn't have either. I think that was Katie Vick.
Yes,
that was Katie Vick, and I think and I don't know. I would imagine if you asked Triple H what was one of the most embarrassing storylines he'd ever been in, I think that probably had to be it. I would hope that was it, because I was there then at that time, and I remember watching backstage Triple H, climbing into the coffin and mounting the corpse, and I just went, man. For me, it's not that I don't have any Purian interests, so it's not any of that, but it's like, where's the believability? Come on. How can you possibly convince yourself that this storyline is going to allow viewers to drop their guard,
right,
suspend their disbelief, and invest themselves in something this corny? It's just dumb.
I mean, I don't mind corny, like when they had Mae Young giving birth to Mark Henry's baby. Okay, I get it.
But you knew going in it was corny.
It was a
set
hand
up to be corny. It wasn't set up to be serious and then turn corny.
Right.
It was a comedy skit. It was meant to be lighthearted. It was meant to be tongue in cheek, and it was great because that's what it was designed to be. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of stuff. Wrestling is a 3-hour show. If you don't create a creative buffet in terms of your characters and your stories, and have a little bit of comedy over here and a little bit of believability over here and a little bit of, sexual tension over here, and you got to have it all. You can't just have one type of storytelling technique. I get that. But you also, I also don't believe it's possible to try to create reality and believability, intensity, and then add an element of corniness on top of it and expect people to buy into it. Just, it's a contract. It doesn't work.
Now, let's wrap up with just a few quick thoughts. When another wrestler puts another wrestler over, it can make their career. Like when Hogan dropped the strap
Mm-hmm.
to Goldberg, sold out Georgia Dome, which might have been the hottest crowd I've ever seen in my life. That made Goldberg. How hard is it to come to a guy or a girl, I guess, in some situations, and not tell them, hey, your career's kind of, either winding down or, it's we need to get this new younger person. Is that a hard phone call or face-to-face meeting to have?
No, and actually that was Hulk's idea, not mine. I was here. It's funny. There are moments that I can't tell you what I ate for breakfast yesterday. Okay. But I can tell you where I was driving on the 90 in Marina del Rey when I got the phone call from Hulk saying, hey, I got an idea for Atlanta. Let's do this. That was his idea, not mine, because he knew it was the right time. He knew it was going to be a hot crowd. He knew that it was time. So it was his idea.
Because that's WCW. That's their bullseye in terms of their fan base in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think we sold, I don't know what the number was, somewhere between 50 and 60,000 tickets for that.
And a great Rodman was involved, and Mr. Perfect, and DDP. It was just like, it made you love Goldberg.
Mm-hmm.
Versus today, like some of the older guys. I'm not familiar with TNA right now, but so speaking WWE specific, seems like some of the older guys don't want to put anyone over. So
it's that old school mentality. You're afraid you're not going to get it back. You're afraid you're not going to get that position again. You're holding on to, it's security. It's job security. And it probably happens in corporate world all the time. It probably happens in your industry all the time. Nobody wants to give up that limelight in that spot. And
for sure.
No different with wrestlers.
Now, how surreal was it for you when you went to work for the WWE that first time after the Monday Night Wars?
Mm-hmm.
Was it not? I mean this completely not as a singer on you, but was it like a little bit of a tail between the legs of this is the company
No, it wasn't. It probably would have been a year or two before, but when I went through what I went through at WCW, and it ended for me the way that it did, I was I was disappointed in myself, first and foremost, because I knew I should have left under my own terms a year or two prior, and I didn't. I second guessed myself and my instinct, and I was angry at myself for doing so because it obviously didn't end well for me, and it could have. So I was angry with myself or disappointed more than anything with myself, but I'd gotten over it. I'm the type of person that I just don't dwell on the past. I can't do anything about it. It's already done. It's over with. I either learn from it and it benefits me going forward, or if it creates hurt or pain for me, I just quit thinking about it. It's that simple. And I had quit thinking about it. I had accepted it and moved on. I expected my life to be, I was here in Los Angeles. I was producing television. I had no intention of ever getting back in the wrestling business again. And when I got the call from Vince McMahon, actually, I forgot all about this. I had actually gotten a call a year before from JR asking me to come in and do something with the WWE. And I just wasn't ready. I mean, physically, I wasn't ready. I was in Wyoming. I had 20 or 30 people at my house for the 4th of July. I was probably 30 pounds overweight and probably had a buzz on when he called me, and they wanted me to jump on a plane and be there 2 days later. And I said, man, I can't. I just can't. Horrible timing. I can't. And I thought, well, that's it. Nobody ever, how many people get a call from the WWE to come in and, do something on pay-per-view and then turn them down, which is what I did. So I didn't expect to ever hear from them again. But when Vince called me, and he called me himself, I didn't have someone else do it. I was on that phone call for maybe 3 minutes. I went, wow, this could be awesome, because it gave me the opportunity to end my career on a positive note. Right. I knew I was coming in as nothing more than a talent. When I say that, no more, no less than a talent, but I was coming in at a high profile. I was going to get to perform on the largest stage in our industry. I was going to be working with some of the best performers in the industry at that time. And I knew I was pretty good at it. And I knew that I could have fun doing it and end it on a positive note. So when I got there, I was as excited as I was the first time I had a gig in the wrestling business. I felt nothing but positive about it.
Was there any, I know that toward the end of your WCW, was it like a bad relationship with a woman, like where it's like you should have left a little earlier, but you
It was worse than that. It was worse than that. I knew in 98, and I've written about this, in my book, I knew in 98 when things were still going really well. I knew the handwriting was on the wall for me. I saw what was happening. The AOL Time Warner merger was beginning to manifest and have its impact on not only WCW, but a lot of other divisions within Turner Broadcasting. And I knew when I was having my budgets that were previously approved 6 months in advance or a year in advance in some cases, I was having my budgets arbitrarily cut dramatically, not by a couple 10, 20, 40,000 here or there, but by tens of millions of dollars being erased from my budget for no other reason that they wanted to allocate those resources to another division so that the overall Turner Broadcasting EBITDA, which is an accounting term, would reflect more favorably on other divisions and raise stock value. That's what that was about. And when I saw that, I fought it. I was a belligerent son of a bitch because in my past at WCW, at Turner Broadcasting, after a while, if somebody up above me, a senior executive above me, would try to, force something onto me that I didn't want, I would fight it through the executive committee level. And if I had to, I'd fight it all the way up to Ted Turner because I knew most of the time I would probably win that fight if I was justified. Right. I had Ted's support. What I didn't know back in 98 and 99 is that Ted was no longer in charge of his own company. Ted didn't even know it at that time. There were so many things going on politically and corporately around Ted between Gerald Levin and Steve Case and all the people around them, that Ted Turner was standing on the rug and it wasn't being pulled out from underneath him. It was being unwoven behind his back and he didn't even realize it. Right. And I wish I would have left in 98 because I wanted to. I had made up my mind I was going to, and I talked myself out of it. And I stayed for another year, a little more than a year, and it was brutal. It was really brutal. I've never been in so much mental and emotional pain as I was then. It was just getting the shit kicked out of you every single day. Actually, it's worse because I've had that happen, and that's not nearly as bad. It was tough.
And I imagine if you're feeling that way, then the wrestlers are feeling that way. It must have been a toxic, not even locker room, but just.
Oh, I mean, everybody. It toxic is a perfect word for it. And it was in the office. My assistants could see it. Everybody around me could see it. It was bad. It was really bad.
And then the WWE at that time was, I guess, with the Attitude Era was in full force then. And, that probably made it even worse.
It did, and for me, I mean, it made it worse for me because, number one, they were beating me at my own game.
Right.
I forced them to change their formula and move away from teen and preteen type of presentations and change their creative business model so that they were now going after my 18 to 34-year-old male audience in a more adult and contemporary kind of a format. And the fact that I was getting my ass kicked with the formula that I created, that really stung because I'm competitive that way. I'm very competitive. But the part that really bothered me the most was the fact that corporately I was being abandoned. No one cared because no one wanted WCW to succeed. You have to keep in mind, there were executives in Turner Broadcasting that wanted WCW to go away before I ever got the job there.
It's because it was like these upper crust executives were like
they hated it.
Pro wrestling.
They hated it. It wasn't cool. They didn't want to talk about it at the country club. It wasn't. They were embarrassed by it, and prior to me getting in charge, there was Bill Watts, and he said a lot of really stupid stuff that would get him fired from anybody at this stage of things. But a lot of embarrassing things, took a lot of bad publicity. Turner Broadcasting did, and they were losing $10 million a year on top of it. So it had no support except for Ted.
Now, I know we've briefly talked about it. Do you think there'll ever be a company that can compete with the WWE? Like, I know TNA has had their moments of, closeness,
No, not really. I
was trying to be
respectfully
nice.
disagree. You don't have to be nice. I really can't talk about them because I'm in litigation.
Oh,
with them,
then never mind.
So I can't say too much. But to answer your question, no, I don't think that another company will be able to challenge WWE. They're too, they're on the number one cable network. I think number one or number two cable networks. They have been for 25 years or however long it's been. They're so well established in the pay-per-view industry. They've got their own network, for crying out loud, with over 1 million subscribers at $10 a head. So they've got their own distribution now if they absolutely need it. They're just too big. And it's not that someone couldn't come along who had enough money and had enough support to beat them creatively or strategically, but you'll never find another television network that would be willing to make that level of commitment again. Because it just won't happen.
I mean, like, to me, to go up against them is exactly what you guys had in WCW. To me, it's a 4-step process of you need a short-term plan, which was you might consider the NW, or signing the free agents, bringing over the Hogans, the Rudes, the Macho Mans, people with name recognition, where a guy like me would go, oh, Macho Man's at WCW now? I'm going to watch that. And then, maybe the midterm plan was the NWO storyline and the cruiserweights. I mean, you guys certainly featured them, the Guerreros, the Benoits, the Dean Malenkos. And then you need the money to implement all these plans. And then you need a long-term plan. Right.
And you need a broadcast partner, a network, cable network, a television partner that is willing to make a long-term commitment. And it'll never happen. In today's environment, we're in Hollywood, for crying out loud. You can go anywhere in this town and talk to a television executive and ask them how long they would give a television show before they decide to pull the plug on it. If a show isn't hot in the first 3, 4, 5 episodes of a new season, they're scrambling to replace it.
It's unbelievable.
It's really hard in today's environment. So to think that that anyone could get an established cable outlet or network, for that matter, to make a long-term commitment and grow a brand over the course of 5 years or 10 years, that'll never happen. Not in today's environment.
Is it similar to going up against, say, the UFC, which they seem to almost be kind of WWE-like, that they buy up their competition? Like, there's a company called Bellator now that's kind of competing with them, but not really. Is it just, they're just too big to go up against?
They got there first. There's a lot to be said for getting there first. In UFC, they got there first. They got there big, and they became very powerful. And I like Bellator. I watch Bellator. I'm familiar. Scott Coker. He's a great. I've known him since he was about 10 years old.
I love him.
He's a great guy. And smart guy, and a good human being. And I know some of the executives over at Spike that are a part of the production. So I support them, and I like watching. I like MMA. For the most part. Some of it I don't really enjoy, but
what don't you enjoy about it?
I like. I'm hesitating because I don't want to be too critical, because I know I'm going to.
I'm not asking you to.
I'm going to take a beating for what I'm about to say, but I spent time in the martial arts. I was a kickboxer. I appreciate really highly skilled kickers and punchers, and too often I see people in MMA that are presented as great strikers or great kickers who aren't. They just aren't. And I miss seeing really, really good athleticism when it comes to kicking and punching, because it's dynamic to watch. It's fun. Watching when Ronda Rousey and I'm a big Ronda Rousey fan, so I wasn't happy to see her lose at all. But the technique that Holmes used to beat her was so perfect. Her footwork, now this is before the kick. If you watch her footwork, watch the way she controlled the ring, watch the way she just mastered the distance between her and Ronda Rousey. That, to me, I got really excited watching that, because that's real skill. Not to say that a lot of other fighters aren't skilled, because they clearly are, but it's the type of skill that I enjoy watching. And when she got knocked out, when Rousey got knocked out with an absolutely picture perfect round kick delivered exactly on target. It just could not have been more perfect. I like that. When I see guys that are sloppy punchers and sloppy kickers being exalted as great strikers, it kind of pisses me off a little bit. And I love watching a good ground game. I love watching great amateur wrestling, collegiate wrestling. I watch it on TV when it's on. I love that, but I really love watching good kicking and punching.
Did you enjoy Brock Lesnar going over from wrestling to basically dominating it? I mean, that was amazing to me to see him. He might have the greatest MMA card in history. I mean, he only fought champions.
Yeah, but it didn't work out so well for him, did it?
Well, I think this goes into the psychology of I don't know him at all. He seems to be, at least in the MMA world of his life, kind of a bully. Like, hey, I'm the biggest, baddest guy in here. And the guy, Alistair Overeem, who beat him, he almost outbullied him. Like, I'll never forget when they came in before their match in the ring. Overeem stood in the middle of the ring and just stared at him like, you're in my world now.
He wasn't intimidated.
Right.
And that's the thing with, and I don't know Brock very well at all. I've talked to Brock, I've had occasion to spend a little bit of time with him, but I certainly don't know him. And I'm not being critical of him at all because he's a phenomenal athlete. He was
Unbelievable.
NCAA, wrestling champion. He was a walk-on to the Minnesota Vikings. He played pro football in the NFL at a very high level, performs at a very high level in WWE, performed at a very high level at UFC. So he's at a level of athletic performance that I can only dream about. But I will say this. When you get a guy like Brock Lesnar, who's been so successful, so big, so powerful, so intimidating, so successful at so many different levels, but has never really been punched in the head, it's interesting to see what happens to people that have never been punched in the head, no matter how big and jacked up they are and how tough they are and how tough they talk. If you've never been hit square on the chin in a competitive situation in your life, and you finally do, you see what people are really made of. And Brock was not really good at taking shots. He was good at giving them, but he wasn't too good at taking them.
Well, when Overeem hit him with the liver kick, you actually could see Lesnar go, ouch. Like, I can't imagine doing anything to that man to make him feel pain. But then on the flip side, Overeem, I think in his next fight, had that he almost like a Rick Rude heel attitude. And Bigfoot Silva hated him because Overeem was pretty disrespectful. And then you saw Overeem get hit and go, oh, and he got knocked out. And I mean, it's in real fighting, MMA, karate, kickboxing, is it almost more mental than your physical attributes?
It's both. And I never fought at that level. I can only imagine what it's like. But I do know even at the level that I competed at, it is a mind over matter type. When you step into that ring and you're going to fight, pain is just not something that you're allowed to register. It's just, you fight through it.
Right.
I mean, we trained that way when I came up in karate. I trained at a particularly very aggressive, very physical school that wouldn't even be in business in today's environment. They would be sued 15 times a week.
Like the Stu Hart dojo type of...
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I mean, they were all my instructors were hardcore fighters from down in Texas, and their opinion of competing was, spend the first 2 years knocking everybody out and getting disqualified, and then you'll have their respect, and it'll just be easier after that. That was the mentality. So I learned early on is, you get the wind knocked out of you, get kicked in the ribs, you get broken ribs, you get punched in the head. You love that. You embrace that. That's your fuel. Fight through that. Thank your opponent for kicking you that hard because now you really want to fight. You just train yourself to think that way. Or if you haven't, then, you get hit and you collapse.
Yeah, I mean, is it similar in the world of wrestling where you might have a guy with a great body, physically gifted, but they've never really been, say, given a Benoit suplex? Like, did you have guys go, hey, I don't really like working with Benoit because of those suplexes he gives me?
No, there's a pride in our business or in the professional wrestling business where guys want to go. Guys, most of the people that I've talk to about it. You get some people that'll complain every once in a while. Hey, brother, lighten up a little bit, brother. And not to infer that would be Hulk's point of view, because he liked it stiff too. He liked to get in there, because they all want it to look real. They're in that ring. They're 5 feet away from people at ringside, right, or less sometimes, and they know the disappointment in that person's face when they see something that they go, oh, you missed that by a mile, and you're selling that. What are you doing?
Right.
They don't want to feel that. It's like they feel naked in there when they're doing that. So they want it to be believable. They want to convince people that it's real. And usually the stiffer it is, the easier it is. So most guys that I know, that I can remember, they just love laying it in because it's more believable.
Well, I saw they recently at a WWE event at the Forum, which was, I didn't know the Forum's having wrestling events anymore. And to see Brock Lesnar wrestle live, he gave, who was it, Alberto Del Rio, like 3 or 4 suplexes. It was like, and you could tell, you're right, like, I'm not saying Del Rio enjoyed them, but it got him like into the match, and then he did it with that Ukrainian wrestler Rusev, and it was just unbelievable to see Lesnar that close live, and it's like, wow.
He's just a freak of nature, isn't he?
Would you say he's the most physically gifted freak of nature that you've ever seen in the business?
His size, no doubt. I mean, he's a 1 in a million, for his size in particular. But there's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys in that ring right now on that roster that are way tougher than people know or give them credit for being.
Right. No, I was so impressed by, like I said, Del Rio just taking these unbelievable suplexes and getting right back up, getting another one. And even Reigns at WrestleMania, I think he took about 7 or 8 Lesnar suplexes. Like, wow, this guy's fucking tough.
Yeah, watch Jericho and AJ Styles. They're two very. Chris is no young chicken either. He's, I don't know how old he is. He's got to be 40 plus. But he's still real physical. He can take it. He can give it. He can take it. He can play either way. AJ's a tough physical guy. He's a great guy too. By the way, he's a very, very good human being.
Are you glad he's in the WWE? Kind of getting his not shot, but
no, he deserves it. He's worked hard. He's a good human being. He's kept his nose clean. He hasn't been distracted with all the other things that can take someone down. And he's focused and he's committed and he deserves it. I couldn't be happier for him.
Well, now, do you like you mentioned Scott Coker earlier, and I just love how he does things because, UFC is like I don't want to say legitimate MMA, but Scott seems to go with the more entertaining, like recently Ken Shamrock, 51 years old. A lot of people maybe weren't excited at him being in a competitive UFC or MMA match against Royce Gracie, and then he had Kimbo Slice against a guy by the name of Dada 5000.
That was a mess.
Did you see it?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think? Like, going back to your promoting brain, do you think he goes, okay, we can't really compete with the quality of the UFC. We're going to give them a more like entertaining, like legit, but more circus freak.
Well, it's kind of like what we talked about earlier. I think, and I don't know, I've never talked to Scott about this. I haven't had a conversation with Scott in so long I can't remember. But, he's a smart guy. And I think you sit back, you go, look, okay, we've got a card. We've got some great, legitimate, highly skilled athletes that are going to be performing. But there's a certain aspect of the audience that is nostalgic, that remembers the older names, remembers a guy like Shamrock, and would like to see him one last time. It's no different than, why did people go to Creed? Why was everybody cheering Sylvester Stallone on as much as they were? Yes, it's because he did a phenomenal job acting, but it's really because, damn it, it's a legacy.
Oh, absolutely.
He's the guy. And people enjoy seeing that. So Scott gave it to him because there's an element of the audience that wants to see it, but he's not building his entire promotion around it. He's just offering it as garnish on a plate, and just makes the whole plate look a little better.
Well, I
hope to.
Listen, when you brought Warrior back, it was like brought so many childhood memories. Like, it was just, and I know it maybe didn't work out the way we all wanted, but it was, I get what you're saying. And if we could just finish up the last minute or two, you kind of did something in the reality TV world that brought back a lot of memories for me in bringing back Adrian's Med.
That was fun, wasn't
it? And several other people.
Confessions of a Teen Idol, yeah.
Do you like, I've always wondered when you're doing reality TV, is it hard to go to these celebrities who, it's almost like wrestling, who were huge at one time, big, whatever the right word is, and go, hey, we want to do a show based around you making a comeback? Is it hard to approach them? Or are they like, oh, what do you mean comeback? I'm still...
No, that's not been my experience. And, to be honest about it, my partner, Jason Hervey, who was the older brother in the Wonder Years.
Oh, absolutely.
Great guy. And a lot of those relationships were Jason's relationships because he grew up with those guys. He auditioned with them. He partied with them. He worked with them. So a lot of those relationships, specifically for that show, Confessions of a Teen Idol, were Jason's relationships, and they were friends of his. So that was easy for him. My experience has been in some of the celebrities that I've dealt with that were at one time much bigger stars than they might currently be, is they're grateful for an opportunity to get out there and perform again, just like I am.
Right.
I go to indie shows now, sometimes spontaneously, with no promotion or advertising, just because I dig it. I get it. It reminds me of why I liked getting involved in wrestling in the first place, because it's raw, it's just pure. There's no cameras, there's not 10,000 people in an arena. There's no politics. There's nobody arguing over finishes. Nobody trying to get their stuff in. Just a bunch of people, guys, girls that are living their version of their dream. And I love show. I'm going to one. I went to one 2 weeks ago in Albuquerque. Literally on a Friday night, I went, I'm going to go to that show. Got in my car Saturday morning and drove 9 hours to Albuquerque and went to an independent show with about 250, 300 people in the arena.
And people must have freaked out.
They freaked out, and I had the most fun I probably had in 15 years.
Because I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit, Mr. Bischoff. You were the reason to me, and I'm not trying to kiss your ass, why wrestling got good again. Like, because you gave the WWE, a foil to play off of, and you were a great bad guy. Like, when you first started the NWO and you come out there and you talk poorly about Sting and he came up from behind you. Now there's one video clip and you might not remember this. It was one of the first times you were like the spokesman for the NWO, and I think it might have been the first time Sting came up behind you. And there was a moment where you were like, we couldn't find Sting. We went to the gym he used to work at. And you're looking up and you're like, it's not going to happen, folks. And the crowd's really fucking booing you. And then Sting comes up from behind you. And there's a beer that gets thrown at you. And you looked pissed. Do you remember that at all? You were in the ring alone. And it didn't look like that beer was part of the program.
No, I don't remember that one because that happened more than once where I got stuff thrown at me like that.
So that was not, when stuff would get thrown at you, that was not a mark in the crowd like okay, Eric, I'm going to throw this beer at you. I mean, that was like a real fan.
No, it was real. It was real. There was one occasion, I remember, I think it was I think we were in New Jersey. We might have been in Newark. And Hulk and I were coming down the ramp, and I always came down before him, and he was playing his guitar, and I'd bow down in front of him to, do my shtick, right? And I was about 2 feet ahead of him, and I remember out of the corner of my eye seeing a bottle coming from way up high. I mean, way up high. And it went by my face, missed my face by about 2 or 3 inches, and hit the concrete to my left, and it was a full bottle of beer. Had that bottle of beer hit me or Hulk in the head, it would have been at the very least lights out for the evening, and it could have been worse. So yeah, it happened. People would throw batteries, D-cell batteries. That was a real popular item to throw for a long time. And even coins, people throw quarters, or $50. You start winging those things from the cheap seats, and they've got some speed on them by the time they get to you. So I was never too happy to see that happen, but it did.
Okay, I'm just pulling up this clip just to jog your memory. Now there's point in time where, the beer's going to hit you and you just had the most pissed off look on your face. And
I was probably actually happy about it and just working with it, because that I never really got upset when people threw stuff, because I knew
you're doing your job.
We were hitting them out of the park. I mean, okay, bonus points, bonus points, bonus points. It's when they don't throw stuff and they don't react, or they react in a Pavlovian manner. If they just cheer because they know they're supposed to cheer, or boo because they know they're supposed to boo. And there's a difference between feeling it and really being angry and just being Pavlov's dog. Oh, they rang the heel bell, so I'm supposed to boo now. Yeah. That crowd was pretty hot.
Oh, they hated you.
Well, that was awesome.
No, it was
awesome.
And then I think when the Sting Army came down to save Piper and DDP in the ring, you were the best bad guy ever. So I thank you for everything you've done for wrestling.
Oh man, I was an honor. I was blessed to be able to have that opportunity. It was a moment in time, and I get a kick out of watching it now.
And from every comic up at the Comedy Store who loves pro wrestling, they all love you, man. And
there's nowhere else on the planet I can go where there's more than 6 people in one room, other than a family reunion where people love me. So I may show up and just take a show.
They would love. I'm sure when you go to a comedy club, you don't want to get on stage, but that's what got Mr. Piper so ingrained into the comedy community. Is he would show up there late night, he'd go on stage, and he'd tell some funny stories, and then we'd all heckle him in the back. And he became one of us. And it was just like, if you did that one night at the Comedy Store.
I don't know if I have the balls for that, but I may have to work up to it.
Oh, we would ask you dumb questions from the back. I would usually lead the charge, and then
I have to give that a shot.
I can arrange it. Every comic up there, everyone I said, hey, I'm getting Eric Bischoff on, that their jaws dropped, because you were so instrumental to us.
That's cool as hell.
So I know you have to get going, and where can I know you don't need my help promoting things, but on Twitter, do you I notice you tweet back at people who leave you nice comments, and where can people find you on Twitter, Mr. Bischoff?
Bischoff.
Simple enough.
At Bischoff.
And where do you have a website? I know you produce a lot of shows with Mr. Hervey. Is there a site you can direct people to?
Yeah, you can go to bhe.tv, and that's our website. Or I'm on Facebook. Eric Bischoff /controversy is my kind of wrestling Facebook page. So I try to post some cool wrestling related stuff there. My personal Facebook page is really just for close friends and family, and has nothing to do with wrestling. But my wrestling page is Eric Bischoff Controversy.
And the book, can the people get the book as an audio book?
You can get it through Amazon. Controversy Creates Cash. And by the way, when you reached out to me and I saw you wanted to do a podcast on a show called Inappropriate Earl, and I thought, wait a minute, Inappropriate Earl, Controversy Creates Cash. That's just made in heaven. That's supposed to happen.
I was so honored to be a part of Mr. Piper's podcast the last 4 or 5 months of his life. And, he was actually supposed to come over the day he passed.
Oh, wow.
I thought, I know when you get an email or a tweet from a guy like me, you're like, probably, who the fuck is this guy? But I thought, you know what? If I could get Mr. Piper, Mr. Bischoff's the next guy.
No, I'm glad you did. This is really fun. We'll do it again.
I would like, I try and ask you, I know you get sick of getting asked about the NWO, about Hogan, about, staying warrior. Can I pitch you one more idea?
Sure.
And I know you're good friends with Mr. Hogan, and we're not going to talk about any bad things, but being that he is a pro wrestler, and he's had some wacky times the last year, I think I have the perfect angle to get him back in everyone's good graces.
I like it.
I'm being completely serious. Next year at the Royal Rumble, you bring him back, and you have him take on every black wrestler on the roster.
Okay.
Well, I'm just saying, I think that would get him I think that would work. I could see by the look on your face you're not a fan of that
No,
idea.
I'm just waiting to see where it's going to go. Okay, so
Well, it's just a one-off.
Okay, but what's the outcome?
Well, you could go one of two ways. You could have them beat them, or you could have them like half comic, half serious, beat the shit out of him.
I don't think the audience would want to see that.
Well, it would be done more in a humorous way than because there was that situation, and I think, oh wow, he's a good sport.
Well, he is a good sport, and the truth is, if there was something positive that Hulk could do, he'd probably embrace doing it. But yeah, you'd have to think that through and make sure that it was something that made the audience happy. I don't think the audience, and I'm not justifying or defending anything that happened, because I was there for that period of his time or his life when he was really, really broken and things were really dark, and he was a fucking mess. There's not a better way to say it. He was a broken shell of a person. You take the back injury that he had, the pain pills that he was taking because of the back injury, the fact that he couldn't walk. Then he'd throw, a quart or two of Captain Morgan on top of that every day, and another fistful of pills to get through an afternoon. And you can just only imagine what's left in terms of a human being. And that was, the dark spot that he was at. But I can also tell you there is not a nicer, kinder, gentler, non-racist person that I know.
Oh, absolutely. And
So I think if we could come up with a way to embrace the reality of what happened, but turn it into a positive, I know him well enough to know he'd embrace it.
Because I know in the wrestling world, I mean, there have been some pretty wacky characters. Slick.
Yeah.
I mean, Slick the Pimp. Kamala the Savage. Giant who couldn't speak English. Akeem the African Dream, who turned, I don't know, black all of a sudden after being like the whitest wrestler I've ever, the one-man gang. I'm going to get up to hit stop because I know I keep saying I could talk to you forever. When you approach a wrestler like the one-man gang, and I know you weren't there for this, and you hit him with, hey man, we know you're a legit badass, you're a great big man wrestler, but we're going to turn you black. We're going to make you speak jive. Do you hope they go for it, or do you just tell them, hey, this is what you're doing next week?
I mean, I
and not in that specific. I know you weren't there, but say you had a wacky idea for I don't know, Lenny and Lodi, the Hollywood Blondes. Sure. Did you go to them and say, hey guys, we're going to kind of turn you into a semi-gay tag team? I mean, these guys are legit wrestlers. They probably wrestling 20 years in the dungeons.
Earl, it's no different than I think, a director who's got, assembles a cast of actors for a movie. You got to bring out the best, and you want an actor to play a certain character. You've got to sell it to them. You've got to convince them that it's good for them. You've got to help them find themselves in that character that you want them to be, so that they can do a good job with it. It's never ever. I can imagine going to any performer who's worth anything and saying, "This is what you're going to do, whether you like it or not. Just go do it."
Right.
Because the end result is going to be pretty predictable.
Well, I mean, I know in the pro wrestling world, it's pretty much a cut and dry. It's almost like being a comic, having a comedy club owner saying, hey, you got to kind of do this. We all pretty much take it. Okay, sure. But I know in the wrestling world, since these guys and girls, of course, are legitimate athletes, and some probably have an ego of, like when you guys would give Dean Malenko humorous spots, which I always loved because he seemed to be a pretty serious guy. But I thought they were great when he would.
Because he's naturally funny as hell.
Right.
He's just naturally funny. He'd like doing that stuff. He'd like doing a guy like Dean Malenko is so confident in himself. And he knows what he's capable of doing. There's not an ounce of insecurity in that gentleman. So when we asked him to do something that was fun and out of character, it didn't bother him to do it because he had that much confidence.
And same with a guy like Lance Storm, who strikes me as a pretty, I train with Stu Hart. I'm not.
They're performers, man. They just want to perform and have fun doing it.
Well, once again, Mr. Bischoff, from me and every comic at the Comedy Store, I really appreciate you doing this.
Oh, it's been a blast.
And guys, Inappropriate Earl, SoundCloud on iTunes. If you don't follow Eric Bischoff, follow him because he didn't have to come down here and talk with me for 2 hours. He's been getting these questions for 30 years. And so just respect him and respect me for getting him down here. And
here.
Easy E, it's an honor.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.